And we want to know in practical ways, how do we move forward? And how do we live a life that's pleasing to God, that honors God? And how do we, it's kind of, I'll say this somewhat in jest, but it's true too. How do we not have a dramatic testimony? In other words, no one needs my story, right? I don't want there to be any more stories of recovery from porn addiction, right? I want everybody just to have a low-key, I love Jesus, he touched my life and he saves me testimony, right? We don't need anything that's so outrageous. And yet, Revelation 12:11, they overcame by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony. And I don't always think that testimony is, as dramatic. I love running into people. Sometimes they'll come up to me after a weekend of talks and they'll go, Pastor, I haven't done anything. That's good. Keep going that way. Don't do stuff. So anyway, so let me read a couple of passages just to kind of set the tone, and then I want to hear from you. Maybe if there's anything that's just sort of come up as you've heard me speak a couple of times or a few times, and questions, comments, things that you agreed with, disagreed with, or are challenged about, or whatever. We'll spend a few moments there because, again, it's the dialogue that's good. And we're a fairly small group, so it's prime opportunity to get into some of this. But a couple of passages that are very, very meaningful to me on the journey, if you will. And I hinted at this, is this walking in the light from 1 John. Listen to this, 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through the end of this section, or maybe the end of the chapter. Yeah, it's the end of the chapter. So 1 John chapter 1, verse 5, this is the message we have heard from him and declare to you, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him, right, that's us, we're Christ followers, and so therefore we claim to have fellowship with God because we've been reconciled with him, yet walk in the darkness. We lie and do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, remember I said the light switch came on, we have fellowship with one another. Remember the horizontal? We have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. So there's this implication of a transparency, of an openness, of a coming into the light. Now that doesn't imply full disclosure in every setting, right? That doesn't mean everybody just gets to get up and say how terrible they are, they've been, or I guess they wouldn't say how they're going to be, but it's just bad. But it is to say that perhaps in the context of a community of faith, there is a level of openness and transparency that we should be able to experience. And I'll get into that in just a minute, because often the question is, well, what happens now in the context of my story? Where did I go after the breakthrough, after it was clear I wasn't going to lose my family? It's not like all the porn sites shut down, right? It's not like everyone started to dress more appropriately in the world. that didn't happen. You still got to walk and live and operate as a male, as a female, as people who are given the gift of sexuality with desire and all those sorts of things in this world. So that's 1 John 1, verses 5 through 7. And then let me go to Hebrews, because I made a running reference earlier, and running really is my thing. I wish I had thought about to put this slide up there, but this is just another crazy side thing, all right? So you can get a little window into my world. I am running the New York City Marathon, actually the Chicago Marathon, and the New York City Marathon this year. Yeah, I know. They're like a month apart. It is absolutely insane that I'm doing it. But I'm doing it because I'm attempting to raise money for clean water for communities around the world that don't have any clean water. So I'm running Chicago to raise money for clean water, and running New York City. So I can tell you more about that later. But I am absolutely terrified that to do both of those races. They're both really, really hard. Have you done one or the other? You know, you don't have to be fast. You just got to be willing, I guess, and be willing to feel the pain. All right, so this is Hebrews chapter 12, and we'll go through verse 4. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance. Right? So the breakthrough has come. Now the real journey begins, and that is we have to persevere. There's a persevering nature to, or call to, Christian faith, right? Some of the most tragic stories I've experienced as a pastor and as a Christian is when people depart from the faith, right? They get lured away, they get snatched away. Sometimes it's other teachings that may be false. Sometimes it's just you're just caught up in culture and in the world, if you will, right? And they're just caught up and distracted by other things. But one of the saddest things to see is to see someone who started out on the journey of faith, and they were in, and they were solid, and then they move away, they get lured away because they do not endure in the faith. So he says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Verse 2, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. I know, that's powerful right there. And that is ultimately the goal here, is to fix our eyes on Jesus. So we take our eyes off of that which, and I don't know if I get to this later in the presentation, so I'll just say it now. I think I do, but I'll just say it now. You know, one of the most central aspects of our struggle, whether it be with pornography or other things, is that we've given up worship of the Creator God for worship of the created thing, right? And it very well may be a good thing in some instances, intended for our good, such as sex and sexuality. But the way that we relate to, there's been this great exchange, the way that we relate to that thing is that it has now become, that which is good has now become God. And that's really the treacherous path that we all have to be mindful of, right? So, for example, money. Right? I have my big three, right? My big three. Money, sex, and food. Those are my big three. Those are the big three that can get twisted. Because money is the love of money. Right? So money is good. Yeah, you got to have it. You like it when your employer deposits funds into your account, because now you can pay your responsibilities, you can meet your obligations. Money is good. The love of money, making money a god, when money moves from being a good thing to a God thing, then we find ourselves, right, so idolatry is at the heart of addiction as well. There's a quote I have in here from a book called Banquet in the Grave by Edward T. Welch. He's a Christian philosopher, and he makes a great point. I'll read it to you in a little bit. But the point is, good things can become what I call God things, little g, God things. And so we don't take our eyes off Jesus. And it's crazy. It's very subtle. You know, work can become that God thing. Even church work can become that God thing. We're doing good things in church, but if the pastor is so obsessed with trying to get his church to the next level, trying to be the single human being to spread the gospel to the world, right? He may make an idol out of something, out of ministry, and in the process lose what? His family? His own faith even, right? So don't take our eyes off the one who is the author and the perfecter of our faith. We must maintain eye contact. Peter learned that lesson. Stay with me. Even in the midst of the turmoil, even in the midst of the temptations, stay with me. Stay with me. The disciples, stay with me. Can you stay with me and pray? Stay with me. Persevere through this thing. Fix our eyes on Jesus. the author and perfecter of our faith, the author and the completer of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. So Jesus is our example, and endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Oh, don't lose heart. One of the signs that maybe we've lost heart is when we begin to give our hearts to other things, right? When I begin to siphon off or carve out a portion of my heart for other things, I may have lost hope. And here's the thing, and as much as I love my Seventh-day Adventist community, we have emphasized so much, hey, Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. It's in our name, Advent, Adventist. We are, and I absolutely believe it right along with you. But in some ways, with our high emphasis on the return of Christ, we've left people wondering how to live in anticipation of that return. In other words, how do we live prior to that return? You've been telling me that he's coming, but he isn't here. And my issues and my problems and my sins and my challenges are right now. If the culmination of things isn't until then, what do I do in the right now? So, as with the quote from False Intimacy, Harry Schomburg, let's not become preoccupied with all these things and these distractions that we lose sight of Christ, that we take our eyes off, that we move into some other direction. That is the great challenge. How do we live in the here and the now, while at the same time still anticipating the return of Christ? Because I got stuff I'm facing as soon as I walk out this door. I got stuff I'm facing as soon as I get back to my hotel room, right? And Monday's coming. This is Sabbath. Sunday will be nice, but Monday's coming. I got to go back. And so, to a certain extent, we've been so heavenly minded that we've sort of been not as focused earthly wise. And so that's, hopefully we're able to deal with some of that. Verse 4, in your struggle against sin, you've not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. You have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline. Do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship. So, and part of the reason I continue reading is that, to a certain extent, I think we've been fairly soft as a Christian culture. And whenever we face challenges, we really don't want to face them, so we escape to little corners, right? And often those corners are places that are less challenging. They don't call us to something more. It's interesting, Paul's talk when he talks about the thorn in his flesh. It's almost like, well, that's, and you can debate around what that thorn was, but why was he left with this thing that he just had to endure all the time? And so we live in such a great and incredible world, both as Christians and just in general, that it's almost like we experience hardship, but it's not like we have to live in it very long. We can escape the hardship. And we have become masters at escaping hardship, right? We cope with hardship in the most temporary of ways, right? We just kind of do this and avoid it, and if it gets hard, if I grow weary of my spouse, or if she's too much for me, or if he's too much for me, I can get another one. I just move, right? Just move on to the next thing. So my point is that there's a perseverance that we're called to in this that isn't always simple, cut and dry, and easy. And sometimes pain along the way, and pain in the process, just like a marathon, is just part of it. It just is. It's the reality of living in a sinful and fallen and broken world. All right, so what I want to go to is just some of these things, and hopefully we can get, well, let me ask you the question. I said I was going to open with this. What are the things that have stood out, if anything? Any questions about my story? Anything that God has sort of said to you that you're willing to share? It's all good. It's all good. All right. Well, maybe something will come up along the way here. I want to move past where I was, and what I want to do is get to kind of some of the reality of the invasion of pornography, if you will. Right? There's a book out there called Pornified. And it's written by a secular author, but she recognizes how significant pornography has become in the culture and how it's sort of pornified us. And I don't have that quote. I wish I had it with me. But there's a paragraph in that book that talks, she just makes the case for how the spiritual battle is going on in the culture, and how the language she uses in that quote, she says that pornography is on an incessant advance. So you can't be passive in the face of the battle or the war, great controversy, if you will, that is going on. We can't be silent and we can't be passive. There's some level of engagement that you and I personally as individuals and corporately have to take. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, and it's in these slides. I didn't get through all of these, so sorry. You want to put a number in that blank? I was years old when my parents talked to me about sex. I get that a lot. They're like, I'm still waiting for that talk to happen, actually. Yeah, it's true, right? Yeah. How many of you received a book from a parent? They said, well, yeah, you got the book. Yeah, see? And that, again, it's not a criticism of our parents. It's just kind of the way we've chosen to kind of walk through that. So I don't know if I got here or not, but sex is a gift from God for our good and His glory is kind of the take that I think is a healthy approach, and the take to have as we talk about this in our community. So it is gift, and what we contrast that with is that it is not God. It is gift, it is gift, it is gift, it is not God. Again, the culture makes an idol of hyper stimulation. That's why we're constantly bombarded with images of a sexual nature. They can be subtle or they can be super explicit, right? And even now it's fascinating. You can look at some advertisers and you can see them pull back from that, right? So the last 2 to 3 years, because they realized that because we are all image bearers to a certain extent of God, they can realize that the culture is actually repulsed by the overt stuff at some level. So you take GoDaddy, for example. Remember the URL company? Have you seen their latest ads? They're a little bit different now. They're not as over the top. Carl's Jr. Remember the Carl's Jr. ads that cause all kinds of issues? The hamburger, they were all over the top. Yeah. Yeah, there's a desensitization, no question, yeah. Right.
Look at the past 20 years, and I'll pick the company here in Columbus, like Victoria's Secret.
Yeah.
Right? Their commercials 20 years ago were way different and a lot more alluring than they are now.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where it peaked with the allurement. Well, it's like a roulette show. You peel back. Once you open the surprise, what's left?
Yeah.
And they realize that the marketing behind it is to keep the customer allured.
Yeah.
Once you open the box,
Right.
it's done.
And I would agree to a certain extent that a desensitization has actually happened. But I would also sort of affirm the fingerprint of God on every person. and say that even to the guy who's hooked on pornography, an addict, there are moments, even as they've acted out, that they just kind of pull back and go, this is disgusting. I don't know what I'm doing here. I cannot stop. And I think that that's because we are people who are created by the Lord Jesus. And at some level, there's a spark of the divine in us that says, this is not what I'm meant for. I'm not sure how to fight my way out. Now, yes, it has become the norm. And so we're not as shocked by Victoria's Secrets and the stuff that they present to us. The commercials, we can move on.
Even in the church, I mean, if you rewind the clock 50 years ago,
Sure.
right, there was a time in the Adventist church where women couldn't wear pants.
Right.
There was a time where pastors preached against wearing jewelry.
Yeah.
Right? All of these things that nobody wants to talk about anymore is because, okay, we're trying to keep members in the church. It's all kind of excuses.
Yeah.
Right? So they, people in the church have finally understood. It's like, wait a minute, if you don't have a conversation about this,
Right.
then okay, we're not offending anyone.
Right. No.
So then we can get people to come in here.
I think there's some differences in there, but I hear your point. Yeah.
It's evident in the church. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at photos. You don't have to even talk. Look at the photos from Adventists 50 years ago. Rewind the clock to the
Sure.
1900s. Don't even say anything.
Yeah.
Just open the book.
We-
Take a look, and you will see the difference in society
Yeah.
and the church.
Yeah, there's no question. We've certainly, there's been an evolution of, if you will, modesty. Adventism came up during the temperance movement, right? So we were very sensitive to the way we dressed, what we ate, smoking, drinking, movies, you name it. And now, again, this is sort of evidence that culture has, our people have always been in culture, but it's different now in that culture is so much more intrusive in a sense, and that's technology, right? Because, again, like, what did you say, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have stuff. A Saturday night, I remember when I first became an Adventist, right? A Saturday night, if we were, we would be at the gym, and we'd be playing basketball. And that was the social scene, And then it slowly moved to what we were doing next. We were going to people's houses. We couldn't go to the movie theater. We had to go to people's houses and get a DVD, not a DVD at that point, no, a VHS tape from Blockbuster or some other local little store, right? And we would all sit at home and watch the movie. And so again, you're right, we have evolved. I would argue what's worse is that it has created, I think the basketball and the socials were a much purer form of community and led to deeper intimacy, which I say is the core problem with this whole issue. And once we move from that, this is society, as you have pointed out, infiltrating us for the most part, and us dealing with it probably not in the best way. Once that happened, we became, we became these little individual We became siloed a little bit more. Because if you weren't around for me to go on a Saturday night and sit and watch a movie at home with, well, I'd just go get a VHS and sit at home and watch it by myself. No one else around me, right? And then slowly but surely, the Saturday night social becomes a relic of the past. We're not getting together to play basketball anymore. Maybe you're getting together to play basketball, but the whole church isn't coming out. It's just a guy's thing, which is actually a good thing. But it's just changed. The culture of the church changed for sure. All right, let me keep going. So again, the great temptation is to lift sex into the place of glory when in fact that's only reserved for the God of the universe. It is gift to us. Sex is a gift and not God. Sorry, I can't show you that video. And again, this sort of expresses, this quote here from Ann Voskamp, this expresses something that I hope we are beginning to teach, not just for adults, but for young adults as well. She says this: your body should only be shared with someone who is covenanted to always love your soul. It goes back to kind of what I was saying before, and that is we are more than just a body. And so as you think of a partner, as you think of a girlfriend, boyfriend, or a spouse, you have to hopefully find that people see us as deeper than that. Here's the big thing, another one of those grand myths that floats out into the culture is that if you're not operating from a Christ-centered worldview, then your only other, well, not your only other, but the dominant worldview is just from a secular perspective, even about how we were created, right? So most of the culture is iffy, or they deny a creator. Well, if you deny a creator, an intentional creator God, then that gives you room to dismiss a whole bunch of stuff, and essentially we are then left to just sort of be these animals that are that are subject to whatever comes along our way. So in a sense, culture has bought into that reality and said, well, if I just make it attractive enough and alluring enough, then they'll all just go running after it, because they are nothing more than a bunch of hormones and physical things that are going on with them, right? And so what Scripture attempts to move us towards is the acknowledgement and recognition first that you are created by a divine hand. Your dignity, value, and worth, right, are derived from your identity as a created being by the God of the universe. That's why I tell my girls, and this is where we get into a lot of crazy stuff. So let me land here for just a minute. So you've heard probably about the epidemic of sexting, right? Of amateur porn, of all kinds of manifestations of pornography, where people are creating their own. It's homemade, it's DIY porn. But sexting is one of the things that really alarms people, especially parents, obviously, right? And talk about becoming desensitized. It's almost become, and this is scary, it's almost become expectation that in relationships between adolescents in particular, and even young adults, is that there will be a request very early in the relationship for pictures, right? There'll just be, if you're starting to talk to someone, somebody gives you a number, there's going to be the ask, send pics. And I'll send you my pics. It's just, and that's actually quite terrifying. I want to see you, and I want to see you sexually. I want to see your body. Because essentially what the person is saying, what the requester is saying, is that your value is ultimately, at some level, is primarily in how you look to me and what you can give me, which is actually the opposite of the gift of sexuality the way God intends it to be. Sex was never meant to just be selfish about me. It's never meant to be that way, right? So what is a young girl, and generally it's young ladies who are being asked, and generally a lot of times young ladies will comply. What is she saying? She's saying, I want you to see me. Because at some level she's bought into the lie of the culture, that you're only as valuable as you are hot. And she's saying, I want to be accepted. I don't want to be rejected. I want to be known. Remember, intimacy. I want to be known. And if the knownness of me or knowing me means that you just need to see my body, then I'm willing to give that to you. The tragedy of it is what? That boy in general, again, I'm using those roles, is going to share that with someone else. So he's gonna break that sort of unwritten code that you not to share, and it's gonna devastate the young lady. Yeah, right here, man.
I think the culture, when you talk about a social scene, the church socializing on Saturday night, that time period, of course, we weren't texting,
We weren't.
If you see a woman or you see a girl, or you see a boy that you like, you go and you talk.
Say that, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So the society has evolved. There was a period, a real short period
Yeah.
between old school phones, right? And,
With a cord.
and the point where the internet took off. And now we went from, okay, I'm not coming out onto the social scene to see who I'm talking to. I'm texting with somebody that I barely know.
Right.
Okay, so then this disguise of, okay, you're not who I thought you were, right? So now,
Or you.
not only do I
Yeah. Right. Catfishing.
You could be a serial killer.
Right.
You could be a molester. You could be all these different types of people.
Yeah.
Because behind a cell phone or some kind of text message.
You're anonymous. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You could be an AI I'm talking to.
Right.
Because that's where the world's headed.
Yeah. We've been pushed into more of an anonymous culture, right? You can remain anonymous, and what do you do when you're anonymous? You're incredibly brave, right? If I put flesh and blood in front of you, so that email that you need to type to your coworker, and you're like, I'm just ticked, blah, 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 blah. You're like, oh, dang, I'm going to see them in a little bit. Let me change that word. Let me change. Okay, all right. Right? That's why we say never write an email when you're angry, because you will write stuff that you wouldn't normally write. And so, because there's a power in anonymity, there's a freedom there's a license that we take when we remain anonymous. So if indeed we're committed to real relationship, if indeed we're committed to authentic intimacy, we have to be brave enough to step into talking to, looking at, communicating with, even when there's difficulty, even when there's challenge, even when there's anger and all those things. We have to be willing to step into those conversations, because what does it do? It humanizes the other person. The more it humanizes them, the more you see the dignity of God emerging from them. It's so much harder to hurt them, so much harder to take advantage of them, so much harder to extort from them. It's so much harder just to be a receiver and a taker in a relationship when you actually see them for who they are, right? Have you ever met somebody in the initial meeting, you're like, I don't like you, I like you, right? You've met people like that, right? And then, lo and behold, you get to hear their story. You get to kind of find out a little bit more about them. And you find out something, you go, oh. Well, maybe they're not so bad. Maybe they're not so bad, right? So the problem is that process of knowing gets short-circuited a lot of times, or we don't have the patience. Like you were saying, we've gone from, I had to go and talk to the girl, or I had to go talk to the guy, to now where I can just text you. The text breakup. Don't show hands who's done that. I don't have to get there in the awkward face-to-face conversation with the girl anymore. I can just text and break up with them, right? And so what pornography does, what the what the pornified culture is calling people into is dehumanization of everyone that we come into contact with. Self-preservation through extracting from and extorting from other people, primarily for my own pleasure and my own release. That's kind of how it's become. Now, is there anything in the Bible that would give you any indication at all that that's what God had in mind when he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself? Nothing. That is not biblical. That is straight out of hell, y'all. We do not exist to take advantage of, to extract from, to pull from, and leave others empty. We are not here to abuse, to use, and to simply throw people away. That's just not what it's about. And yet, you see similar things in culture. So, and again, if I kind of go back to what I was started down this path on, is this idea that a young woman, it's a generalization again, generally just wants to be seen and known and valued. And that's true for all of us. No one wants rejection. All right, so I'm going to get a little personal here. My number one trigger as I walk through this addiction, and even to a certain extent today, I have to be very mindful and aware of it, is experiencing rejection. Right? And I see a few head nods. It may be true for you too. It may be true for you and you may not realize it. But if I experience rejection from someone or in an experience in some way, it challenges me, right? It calls me to question, am I enough? Am I valuable enough? Do I mean enough? Does God love me? It just does. And depending upon if I'm healthy and if I'm good, if I'm in a place where God and I are in that good spiritual place, if I'm in a place where the majority of my closest relationships are solid and healthy and good, I will walk through that rejection in a healthy and appropriate way. If I'm not, then the temptation, the draw, the attraction, the allure to all kinds of things that are out there that I can escape to will become really, really intensified. I will see stuff, and I will find ways to somehow escape that rejection, that feeling of being rejected. So, that's why porn is so powerful. You understand that, right? There's not a pornographic website out there that's, when you type it in, you go to the first page, go away. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say, you are not welcome here. It says, I am here to please you. What would you like? I'm here to show you all the excitement and whatever. You are the king of this domain, and you can have it however you want. And if that doesn't do it for you, there's all kinds of websites. In fact, there are a gazillion websites that you could go to and find it. All right, let me keep going. Anything there that anybody want to speak to, anybody want to react to, respond to? We're much deeper. I'm going to keep going. I talked about that. Here's some stats, just some numbers for you to think about. Over 50% of teens who do not eat dinner with their parents have sex by the age of 15 to 16. This rate decreased to 32%, 32% when there were family meals in the home. It's back to our same idea about the socials, the church socials. When we are intentionally connecting with real people, and when there's intimacy, there's a tendency not to settle for the false intimacy of sex in a different context, not designed by God, right? So, and this is pretty powerful. You know, dare I ask how many of us actually sit down as families and eat? You know, gone are the days too. You want to talk about church social being gone? What about the Sabbath afternoon meal together as a family? Is that still intact? Right? So, we're challenged there too with some of these things. And that's just, again, it's the pressures of a culture that says that oh man, I'm going so many different ways. I love this stuff. Think about, one of the things that I enjoy when I'm at non-Adventist churches is to talk about the power of Sabbath in our process of recovery. We've held on to Sabbath to a certain extent. And what does Sabbath cause you to do? It says rest, stop, cease, recover, pause. Don't get so caught up in the rat race. Don't get so caught up in the whirlwind, right? Stop, pause, recover, and then you'll be able to move on and go back out and do well and honor and glorify God. That Sabbath has been one of the most significant pieces of recovery for me. It has. I'm not gonna lie, and that's even in the midst of being a pastor, because you know what happens. You know, we do work more than just Saturdays. By the way, pastors do. That's always the big joke. You only work on Saturday. Why are you tired? So anyway, so we so Sabbath. You know, we end up working Sabbath, obviously Sabbaths too, but to sort of reclaim that, and even as I was still in full-time pastoral ministry, I was able to reclaim that at some level. But the family meal is big in our family, so I would say 60% of the time. I used to be able to say it was higher, but now I have a kid off at college and another one in college, and so. But we were pretty good about mealtime. We would do dinner together. No devices, right? No devices. We're gonna talk. And here's the thing. Again, I'm raising younger generations. I'm raising young adults. I'm raising kids who are in this age range that are the highest consumers of pornography. And they're caught up in the digital age and caught up in constantly being on their phones, all those sorts of things. And so it's open. We talk about whatever. We could talk about sex issues. My wife is now pretty infamous for, even if the girls have friends over, asking the questions around relationships. So you're dating so-and-so. And her first question is generally, has he asked you to send him pictures? Has he sent you a picture of his junk? Right? So when you can create environments like that, where there's that freedom to talk and to share, then there's a lot of opportunity for teaching and instruction and guidance, right? There's a trust there that these girls have with my wife and I that maybe they don't even have with their own parents, right? We're sitting around, we're eating, we're joking, we're laughing, but you also have that opportunity. There's a vulnerability there. You get people's bellies full and they just talk about whatever. But you have opportunities there, especially with young people, to begin to talk about some of this stuff. Literature has consistently pointed to relationship building as a primary means of nurturing the spiritual growth of adolescents. Again, relationships, intimacy. For the Seventh-day Adventist Church, this is Seventh-day Adventist specific research. The quest for meaningful, transformative young adult relationships is a significant barometer for an aging denominational population. Average age in Adventism. It's like 67. Who said 67? It's 60-something. 62. 62. Average age. That's where, so about 5 years ago, we were the fastest growing denomination on the planet. About 2% growth. And the way you put that in perspective is just simply to say we were dying slower than everyone else. So we are still aging and trying to figure out how to get younger. And one of the ways that we do that, one of the ways that we hang on to next generations and grow future generations, is being very intentional around relationships. We have to, at some level, return to what we used to do. And those are very, very difficult things to do. Can we take a few moments and brainstorm? What do we do? How do we do this? Yeah. Oh, so true. Yeah. Yeah.
And we almost went a year, and then the holidays came up.
Yeah.
And then
It's a natural break, and it's hard to get back to.
But even then, it wasn't consistent. Like,
Yeah.
some people came, some people didn't. There were times where, like, Kelvin and I showed up, and no one was there. It was just us.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I feel your pain.
But it's not a speak against anyone who didn't come.
No,
It's just,
no.
We're also spread so thin
Yeah.
that no one wants to commit to one more thing.
Right. And the truth of the matter is, our primary relationships may very well be outside of the church, right? So a lot more of our young adults are going to public schools. They're not just going to Adventist schools. I grew up in a time when, most of my friends were doing the same thing I was doing, right? And through college, through Adventist University, all those sorts of things, we sort of experienced the same things. There's a natural collegiality for us, and we'd get together. That was normal. But those days are kind of gone. You kind of hang with people who have shared experiences. And your shared experience, if you went to a public school, you may have gone to church here or at some Adventist church, but then you may have gone to public school. Well, a lot of your experiences, your shared experiences, are with people that are likely outside of the church. So the church is saying, "Hey, come hang with us." But my buddy, he's got a thing going on, and he's invited me. I'm tied in a closer bond with him, and I want to go hang out with him or her or whatever. So, what are I'm again brainstorming for the next 5 minutes. What do we do? What do we have to do to sort of reclaim this sort of Acts 2 type of church where all the people were together and they shared everything, and you get this warm and fuzzy feeling when you read Acts 2 how everybody was together. Well, they didn't have cell phones and satellite TV and right? Yeah.
That's the same way they get us. Right? You have to turn the tide. The pornography industry is always on the cutting edge.
Yes, they are. That is true. That is a true statement. They brought us DVDs.
What's not being said? What's not being said is, why do they know how to take the elements or the trappings of allurement and use that into their marketing campaign? Okay?
'Cause
So
apparently-
like, for instance, let me give you an example. For instance, in Japan, they now have robots that not only you can have sex with, but they have robots to be your physical emojis. So now, if you understand what an emoji is, if you are trying to be anonymous with some fake picture on the internet where you communicate with somebody, they've taken it to a step further. They've gone back to the physical where now there are two robots, one that represents you and one that represents the other person.
Yeah.
And they use those two robots in speed dating. Okay? So if you want to talk to somebody, you have to be there. You just link up to the robot, and now that robot is your physical communication to somebody who you still don't know what they look like.
Yeah.
That's cutting edge. The church has to understand, well, who do we reach? The young people. It's not going to be the old people we reach. It's the young people that's going to take this message into the future. So you got to go after that college age, that 18 to 25, that
Sure.
18 to 30 age group.
Yeah.
That's what you got to go after.
No,
Why you
yeah,
gonna reach them?
yeah.
Why you don't reach them?
Sure.
Well, you can do that exactly what they do online or what they do at the club. You isolate the females.
Yeah.
Right? Because any guy that's ever, all you old guys that ever got married or dated, you went out to a club.
No question.
And the first thing they
Oh,
do
not
is
me.
they
I never went to
separate
club. So,
from the males, and they're going to say, okay.
had other issues.
They have the females in the door, and then they're going to charge the guys double the price to get in just
Sure.
to go talk to the female.
Yeah, no, that's part of it. There's no question.
That's the game. So you have to understand how the game works, and you have to learn to use cutting edge technology to
Sure.
get at
Yeah.
the younger generation.
I-
So where are they?
I
The
s-
younger generation here, this is a college town. This is not a.
This is a college town. There's no question about that. Yeah.
This is a college town.
Sure.
There are more colleges per square mile here in this city than anywhere else. So you go out to the college campuses, and that's where you get a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think technology has to be leveraged in a holy way, for sure. There's no question about that. You can, I mean, the internet, we did catch on to that. We were also pioneers when it came to satellite evangelism, right? People learned from us. If you guys remember a thing called Net 98, do you remember the short little black guy that was on there with Shasta as a host? That was me. Right? So we were cutting edge, and I agree with you. I still think it's fascinating. How many of you use the YouVersion app on your phone for your Bible? Anybody use your phone? Yeah. How many of you find yourself looking at your screen to access the Bible, Scripture, technology? Yeah, kind of. It's interesting. And okay, here's a better example. How many of you have ebooks? Yeah, ebooks. Lots of it. Yeah. How many of you have actual physical, like hard copy books? Okay, that's still pretty even. Well, I mean, we saw the emergence of the ebook, and we started to see the traditional bookstore sort of go by the wayside to a certain extent. But guess what? It's making a comeback. Publishing houses aren't gone forever. And I think to a certain extent that's an indicator that people still want something of depth and meaning. Part of it is, how do we help people understand that there's something so profound and so significant that we have that you need? And it's a really weird, awkward position for us to be in, to have the pride in our pride enough to say, hey, you need us. And so we've got to figure out a way to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. So, all right, let me go here.
Hi, I just wanted to go on the fact, of the technology and trying to get to people,
Yeah.
in the masses and things. And the problem I see with it is I lived in the era where, I grew up in California, and,
Wow.
I've been to the mega churches, I've been to the people who reach out that way.
Yeah.
and it lacks substance.
Substance, yeah.
And really, you talk about all these youth programs and outreach programs that they try to do at churches, and they failed. And you know why? Because they're fake.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing behind them. The people on stage are fake. The gospel they are preaching is fake.
Mm.
And that's where people have gone wrong. They think the youth want something flashy, want, the lattes and the, they want the free food. They want all
You're
this
saying
stuff.
we need substance.
We need substance. We need something that actually draws them in, which is
Let me go
the true
here, because
gospel.
I've given you a lot of time. Yeah.
I agree with that to an extent. I think what is missing in those areas is the foundation for everything. Youth ministry, young adult ministry, the foundation is relationships. Relationships, relationships, relationships. If you have all these things and you don't have relationships, I don't care how flashy, I don't care how big a budget you have, you're going to fail. Now that we live in an age of technology, now we live in an age of social media and things like that. This is where all young adults are, and to reach them, we need to be where they are. Jesus was with the masses. So in order to reach young adults, to reach young people, we need to be where they are. But it's not only that, it comes down to relationships as well.
Yeah.
And so you were saying, what can we do? 30, 40 years ago, we said, hey, come to us. And they usually did. Now that's not working anymore. Now we got to go to them. So
Wow.
youth ministry, young adult ministry looks like going to where they're at,
Yeah.
going to basketball games, going to take them out to lunch, showing up on their campus, doing life with them, showing them that we care. And then when we say, hey, we got this thing going on at our church, or hey, why don't you come with me?
Yeah.
They're more likely now to be able to come or want to come,
Yeah.
because now we have that relationship built now.
Right.
So it's all about being where the people are at. It's all about relationships. Ministry, I think the wrapping has changed through the centuries, but the foundation hasn't. It's always been about relationships.
Yeah, it's always been Acts 2.
It's always been about how we do that, and what it looks like changes through the times and the culture. And I'm not saying that we should change with the times and culture.
Yeah.
But what's missing in those places is relationships.
The going. So
It is
here's
relationships.
an interesting thing. I think we have to be willing to begin to face the reality of this. It's not just Adventist churches where the pews are primarily empty. We're not the only ones struggling to get young adults to come in. The world of Christianity is suffering. So the fascinating thing is this. The world's largest churches. Where are the world's largest churches? Not in North America. The largest church in North America, it goes between Joel Osteen's church and Life Church out in Oklahoma City. Those two churches run about 50,000 people a weekend. That's how massive they are. But they pale in comparison to the Yoido Church in Seoul, South Korea, where there's 100,000 or more that come to church at their 10 services, where they have 100,000 people. 10,000 people at each service. Is that 100,000? Did I do that math right? Yeah, is that right? So that's what's going on. And I would say to a certain, and then there's South America has another big one, but I think the two largest churches on the planet are in South Korea. China has a big one too. But what's fascinating about that, I think if you take a look at those cultures, it's not technology. If you go to Yoido, I've been there, I've been on the campus. If you go there, the technology is used to transmit the message. Internally though, there's significant relationship, life-on-life intimacy happening. So the power of large megachurches, they get kind of a bad rap sometimes. Oh, it's so big, it's just a big show. But if they're doing it right, and if they're healthy, and if they're good, they have managed to become smaller internally. They use technology, but they don't overuse technology to make it lack substance. And so we're caught in that tension. But there's so much we can say about this. I'm talking too much. I'm going to go here, and then we'll come back over here.
Several things. So just to give you a little bit of background, so I also didn't grow up Adventist. I came to be Adventist when I was like 21, 22. And one of the churches I went to, I was going to church actually on Sabbath and Sunday, like what you mentioned, to some degree. And I came from a mega church. I didn't started off as a mega church, but became a mega church,
Wow.
my Sunday church. And even when I became Adventist, the church culture that I had in growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I'm Caribbean, so a lot of Caribbean churches within like
Yep.
New York, what have you, you'd be in church from 9 a.m. to
Yep.
9 p.m.
Yep.
And a lot of the youth, like we honestly like enjoyed being in church and service.
Yes.
And you didn't have to like try to win us
Entertain
over to
or
come.
win
We
you
would
over,
just
yeah.
all hang out
Yep.
from the beginning through the end of the day, even when having socials.
Right.
So I think even from like mega churches and churches I've gone to in New York, it's just a matter of having different activities. Like I love this, having like afternoon Sabbath stuff.
Conversations,
Like
yeah.
exactly, having real conversations, and I
Yeah.
feel like I haven't seen a lot of that in some of the
Yeah.
Adventist churches. So I think having more of that can definitely help, and like you said, it'll build relationships, and even having smaller groups, like trying to encourage that. So maybe
Right.
having different age ranges within small groups. I do go to one now on Wednesday
Yeah.
nights, and that's awesome. But I think having more of that interaction and social
Yeah.
events where you can meet the youths where they are.
I love it. So another sort of practical application to what you're saying is that it used to be, and I think our parents were better at this than you and me. I know we're probably, y'all tell me when I need to shut up, but we used to be better at this years ago. But we as Adventists, and we grew during this era. In the 80s, we grew like gangbusters, all right? We were on it in the 80s. The 70s and 80s, the public evangelists. But what we did is there was an urgency in us to invite other people to come and be with us. We were doing the going. We would go door to door and we would talk to people. And I'm not saying that needs to be the methodology, although at some level it is true. But in our workplaces, in whatever sphere of influence where we were not afraid to invite. Now, sometimes it was a little creepy, all right? Sometimes we'd hand out a pamphlet that wasn't necessarily Jesus focused. But again, we did it. And the church grew. People came to those evangelistic series. I remember inviting people. I remember talking to a guy at my local gym when I was like 16, 17 years old. I said, hey, man, cool to meet you, but I got this thing going on at my church, and I invited him to come. I don't think he ever came. He didn't come. But we were sort of wired that way. And all I would say is it's sort of on us now. Pastors can't do it. The hired workforce in Adventism can't pull this off. If we're saying go, then everybody has to go. And everybody has to go, and they have to invite. And everybody has to go and be willing to have relationships with new people. Not just the same folks, the new people. So I think that's the challenge of the day, is that our posture has to be, and it's come out here very clear, is that no longer can we just throw up a sign, say we're a church, put up a fancy banner and say, come to us. We actually have to sort of humble ourselves and go out there, and wherever we are, that's where we go. Hope you haven't forgotten your point.
No, I agree with what's been said. I worked with a few churches back in the early 2000s, in the mid-90s, where these churches were beginning spin-offs. Okay, so one of the, some of the churches like CPC
Mhm.
out of Virginia,
Yep.
Mount Rubio out of Riverside. I worked with those churches. So to build an audience and a crowd, the tactics that were used was, first, when you look at the population and the generation, like you say, the average age in the Adventist church is above 60.
It's above 60.
They're
About
not
60.
getting out there and walking. Because the health message, people abandon. So they can't walk. Most of the people in the church, and I'm just being honest, I ain't stepping on the toe, but I'm just telling the truth. They're not getting out there knocking on doors, passing out pamphlets like they used to do in the 80s and 70s. That's long gone. So the technique that was used was, okay, what did Joel Osteen do? They started putting Adventist services on cable networks. Why? And when they put them in the neighborhood, when they broadcast that service in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
like this young man said, a lot of churches that may be in California or a few other places, yeah, they don't have substance. It's the message that's coming out of the pulpit that has to bite.
Yeah.
If the message has no substance or no bite to it, nobody's going to want to listen.
Yeah.
Right? There's plenty of people out there that will want the truth. It's like you look at
It's-
the shooting the past couple of weeks with Nipsey Hussle, right?
Phenomenal guy.
This
I'm glad you brought that up. That makes a good point. But yeah, keep going. I'm gonna come back to that.
Starts out as an argument between two guys, right? So, of course, LA, it's gonna be some gunplay, right? So that's what the young man did. And not just LA, there's plenty of, I could point to New York and
Yeah.
Detroit, the past month where, some two guys get into an argument.
Sure.
And instead, I'm gonna up on you to make sure you get my point. I'm gonna shoot your child in front of you.
Yeah, that's
So
awful.
that you remember who I am.
Sure.
This new millennial generation has they've been sensitized. And it comes from just like 25 years ago for those that may remember Tupac, his thug life theory is that the hate you gave little infants F's everyone.
Yeah.
So that means he was training
The next
young
generation.
kids at that time, which is this new millennial generation.
Yeah.
Right? So his message reached to them. Well, God's message is more powerful, but if you're too sensitive and you don't want to step on toes, the message doesn't get across. Because
Sure.
people are struggling with poverty. People are struggling with pornography. People are struggling to know why am I here?
Right.
Even rich folks. I talk
Yeah.
to some rich folks, and when I say rich folks, you're talking billionaires.
Yeah.
Well, what are you looking for? Why are you spending all this money to send this up into outer space? Because you think you're going to discover another group of beings that's not here.
Yeah.
The world is struggling to understand what the truth is, but the message that God has is the truth. That's what needs to come across.
I agree. There has to be that substance. It's a fascinating phenomenon, too, though. 2 points. One is Joel Osteen doesn't have a ton of substance. All right? But what does he have? He relates to people where they are. And I would say that's a significant amount of substance. You're not going to go to Joel Osteen and look for the next exegesis of Romans 7. You don't go to that church for that. And yet he can attract 50,000 people on a weekend. But what do you hear? Messages of hope. That he relates as a real person to the realities of where you are. And he challenges you to love. He challenges you with all these things. I'm not a huge fan. Even the way that he speaks, from all my seminary training, Pastor, and you would know this, and you guys would know this, he breaks all the rules. All right? But I can't, we can barely get 500 to show up. He gets 50,000. And there's something to a message that is real and relatable. And I think one of our biggest challenges is that we haven't been substance in the sense of we've been authentic. We've been primarily propositional and unrelatable, right? And so the reason why people go to Life Church is because when they go there, there's an excitement, there's an exuberance, there's real people there, and we talk and we get to know each other. And what our evangelical friends have over us as Adventists is that they have learned the power of relationship. Nipsey Hussle, the reason he made such an impact, he understood the power of relationship. He was an influencer and a leader. The guy was a former gang member. He has a checkered past. But did you see the outpouring of love and respect and everything? Why? Because he knew people in that. He was present in that community. And he built something of significance in that community.
But more importantly, what he presented as a message was different than what everybody else was doing. And that's what attracted all these different groups to him.
Yeah, but he lived it out. He embodied it. The power of Jesus.
He
There,
wasn't just a gangbanger. He's somebody that was trying to
Well-
generate peace.
well, he-
Trying to bring communities together.
He didn't live in the suburbs and commute into the inner city. The incarnation is a powerful example of how we have to do ministry. We keep talking about going to, yes. All right? In the early 20th century, where did the church go? To the suburbs, and Adventists followed. We all went to the suburbs. Now we're out in the suburbs, and this is true not just of Adventism, this is true across mainline denominations and not so mainline denominations. Now those suburban churches are struggling, right? So it may be that we got to go, you're right, we got to go where are the masses of the people? Well, people are going back to the city. Young people move into the urban centers, right? They take lifts and ride bikes. They don't necessarily have a car, so where they gotta stay? They gotta stay close to stuff. So we gotta change our whole sort of missiology and our approach to it. If indeed we're gonna get the authentic message to the people, I think it's life on life. I think we have to go where the people are, and the people are in coffee shops, and the people are in all these different places. We just got to be present there, and we got to build relationships and so forth. All right, so Pastor, I'm going to stop us at 3:40? Is that okay? Can I take another 10 minutes? I think all these afternoon sessions, they always go on so long because I like people to talk and stuff. Just real quick, we'll throw these out here. Social media, huge phenomenon, right? 58% of social media using teens have felt closer to another person because of an experience on a social networking site. Remember I said, we're looking for connection, we're looking for intimacy. We want to know and to be known. And it's a false intimacy, but you feel something significant. If I'm showing up at my church and I don't feel like the people there love me or know me or want to get to know me or care anything about me, but I can find it if I hop on Instagram or Snapchat, I'm going to spend more time on Instagram and Snapchat and maybe not at church. 65% of social media users teens have had an experience on a social networking site that made them feel good about themselves. But if I go to church and they make me feel bad about myself. All right? And that isn't to say that sometimes, there's power in that, but they may not be at a place where they're ready for that. 29% of internet sex crime relationships were initiated on a social networking site. So again, that's sort of I would say, along with sort of the physical attractiveness of what's out there in secular culture, whether it be images or whatever, there's a component to the culture that the secular society has picked up on. They understand something about the nature of who we are. I don't know if they're reading their Bibles or not, I doubt it. But they have picked up on the fact that people want to be known. They don't want to experience rejection. They want to be in a relationship. They want to have somebody accept them. And that's kind of what's being offered out there. I think I'm almost done. So the porn phenomenon is a study by Barna. Just real quick, 50 Shades of Wrong. Young adults use more porn and are less likely to say it's bad for society. The more porn you consume, the less of a problem you have with it. 40% of young Christians would rather not view porn at all. And that's where I was trying to get to, this notion that there is still this spark of God in every person. And at some level, yeah, I'm doing it, but I really don't want to. It's kind of like Paul, in Romans 7. The thing that I do, I don't want to do, but I always find myself doing it. And so I think there's that dilemma that goes on, especially for Christians. A recent survey done by Dana Gresh, Secret Keeper Girls, found that 38% of Christian teen girls have sent or received a sext message, 57% have viewed porn, and 73% struggle with self-image. I'm raising 3 girls, y'all. So part of the reason I do this stuff is so that by God's grace, that there are, hopefully as I talk to younger audiences, that there are young men that are hearing this and want to live with integrity and purity and get this and want to be in a relationship with my daughters for more than their bodies. Let me tell you, we've been through the struggles, man. Our journey has not been perfect as we've raised and are raising these 3 girls. We're talking all kind of body image issues. My kids are biracial too, right? So that adds another component. So, people treat them a certain way. I mean, it's just this image thing, how I look, how people value me is so deep and so real. I'm going to get to a quote here. I think there it is. Jimmy Carter. So I don't care what your politics are. I just love this from Jimmy Carter, okay? He says, "Why I believe the mistreatment of women is the #1 human rights abuse. In general, men don't give a damn." Right? So, and again, it's perpetuated by this pornified society and culture. That's a reality. The drug that sort of feeds the human trafficking industry is pornography, right? So you see a lot of the people who are in pornography are trafficked people. They're not there by choice. They're there because someone has them enslaved, essentially. And so, yeah, to a certain extent, we've seen the passivity of men. They haven't been voicing their discontent concern with, or their concern about these issues. So I thought that was a pretty poignant thing. But all right, I'm gonna well, those are organizations that address the issue of human trafficking. No, there we go. Let me hit one back, one more. All right, let me just land here. So just on some practical resources real quick, and we'll wrap it up. So I thought Andy Stanley, do you guys know who Andy Stanley is?
He's great.
He's pastor in Atlanta, pastors North Point Community Church, massive church. They're about 30,000, I think, on a weekend. And but he just has this great gift. And I would say that if you have a young adult that you want to just kind of start the conversation with, go grab that. It's online, available for free, actually. He's The New Rules for Love, Sex, and Dating. Just have them watch that. And watch it, maybe watch it together. And Stanley has this way of talking about sex and sexuality. It's pretty powerful. XXXchurch.com is a ministry that I've been longtime friends with. Really good guys. And we offer through smallgroupsonline.com. Obviously, there's tons of resources at XXXchurch.com, just lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. But we also offer small groups online. Again, where you find community, you can usually find healing, right? Where you find healthy community, you can usually find healing, you can find hope, you can get on the right path to where you then start to lead others, right? Little secret about my own recovery. I did therapy for a little short time. My wife and I did couples therapy for a short time. I went through an intensive called Every Man's Battle, which was wonderful, loved it. But the principles I learned in Every Man's Battle, this idea of intimacy and connection and how that's a key at some level to finding freedom, is what I deployed in my recovery going forward. So I had really no formal recovery beyond Every Man's Battle. But what I did is I took everything to heart that they taught me, and I started to use it. Now, it hasn't been a perfect journey, don't get me wrong. But for most of the time, I've been in some type of small group where there's some accountability, where there's relationship. I have monitored very intentionally my primary relationships, my wife and my children. I've looked for signs of false intimacy where I'm being lured in, drawn in. I've been very conscious and aware of experiencing rejection, because remember, that's one of my triggers. And all I'm saying is that there is a way to navigate this craziness, but we have to be very intentional. We have to have our wits about us. We have to be we have to be mindful and do things that we know speak to our soul, and they don't just relieve the pain for a moment, right? So those are lots of resources that I actually learned a lot from these resources myself. The Conquer series is another great series. It's great for men's groups. So if you have a men's group that say, hey, we want to continue the conversation, buy that. And I think it may be available just online, like on a website, just to watch from the website now. I can't remember. But that's a great series. It's called Conquers, primarily focused for men. Oh, also, XXX Church we have a women's section, or women's ministry, if you will, as well there. The Barna stuff, Every Man series. If you have younger kids, Family Life has this Passport to Purity. I'd go to their website. And again, most of the stuff isn't Adventist focused, right? It's not created by us. You can baptize it yourself. Just make it Adventist. But we do have an Adventist resource that's called Freedom to Love. You go to freedomtolove.org. That's on my next set of slides, but we won't. Do you have those ready, Johnny? The next set of slides?
Yes.
Yeah? Just real quick, you just put the first slide up, that one right there. See, this is a North American Division sponsored resource that addresses the issue of pornography. You'll see my little smiling face on there. You'll see Mike Tucker on there. You'll see Celeste Holbrook, Dr. Celeste Holbrook, talking about women and issues around sexuality. No way, Dr. Celeste is here? Really? Oh, I can't wait to tell her that I was here. from Texas. Oh, cool. She's awesome. I love her. She's great. You should listen to her. So, yeah, so Freedom to Love. I would check that out. newfreedomtolove.org. That's about it. That's about it. Let me share. Usually I share one passage in closing, and I'm going to do that. And then I'm sorry if we just got way off. I hope there's something of value and something edifying that you heard along the way. That I really intentionally kind of do these free-for-alls in the afternoon because I just like to hear what people have to say, and I like to chase some rabbits on things. 2 Corinthians, let's see here. Yeah. So, 1 Corinthians, my bad. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. Just listen to this. Because at the end of the day, I think this is where it's all at. So, he says, be on your guard. Be on your guard. Just have your head up. Be aware. Be conscious. Stand firm in the faith. Stand firm in the faith. God's got you. Don't relinquish the faith chasing some other craziness out there. Hang on to your faith. Hang on to the faith. Be men and women of courage. And yes, women isn't in there, but I'm adding it. Be men and women of courage. Some of these conversations demand courage, but a lot of your relationships, if you're going to do them right, absolutely demand courage. Right? Courage. Be men and women of courage. Be strong. Be strong. And this is verse 14, he finishes off, he says, do everything in love. Remember Jesus' final prayer in John 17? He said, make them one. But even prior to that, I think he says, they will know you are my followers by your love for one another. Got to learn to love. And learn to love those out there too. So it's been good to be with you guys. I appreciate it so much, and I pray that you've been strengthened, encouraged, and edified in some way. So God bless you.
Pastor Bernie, if you can just share, just real quick, just one practical thing for parents who are either they have a kid around the age of 8, 12, 13. They walk in or they figure out that their child is doing this. What's one practical thing they can do?
Yeah.
And the second question is kind of related to that. For those who have younger kids but are wanting to be proactive versus
When do they start
reactive,
talking to them? Yeah.
what is one thing that we can do practically to prepare ourselves and our families to not just deal with this situation reactively,
Yeah.
but to be proactive about it?
Right. First question is, don't panic, don't freak out if you find porn on your teenager's computer or even on your spouse's computer, right? The best approach is going to be, obviously, to confront it with truth, but in humility. As humbly and as appropriately as you can, be firm and speak into it. That is not right, that is not appropriate. What's going on with you? Where are you at? How can we address this issue? If it's a younger person in particular, it's a conversation around that type of thing. And because you're a parent, you get to build boundaries around that thing. So every parent, if your son or daughter has a smartphone, if they access a computer at home, you can build parameters and boundaries around that. Because I imagine you pay for the phone, and I imagine you pay for the internet service, you pay for the house, you pay for the food, right? So you have divine authority. Right? You can take keys, you can take phones, you can cut off all those sorts of things. So I would say, but don't start there necessarily. You have to start with a conversation. Charles McDowell, what's his first name? Why did I just forget his first name? Anyway, last name McDowell, says that Josh McDowell says that rules without relationship lead to rebellion. And what we generally lead with as parents is rules. And I get that, especially, there has to be some immediate rules, especially if it's to protect the child. You get what I'm saying. But relationship, truthful, transparent relationship really helps to establish those rules so they're seen as something that's helpful and not harmful or sets us back. So I would say get around that. Don't wait. Address it immediately. Show your concern. Don't freak out. Don't think that your child's going to become the next, axe murderer or whatever. Usually that's a sign that there's a desire for something. I need to talk about. I need to find out more about this. I want to know how to navigate this. And I always say, let's educate and empower kids so they can navigate these things on their own, because they're not always going to live in my house. So yeah, so that's the one practical thing I would say is just get in there, talk about it, then come up with a little bit of a plan to create a boundary between them and what they're accessing. So if that's software, there's tons of software out there. Net Nanny, Covenant Eyes, X3 Watch, all these things. So those websites, go to those websites that I had up there, and you will see all those, you'll see resources. The good thing about a big problem is that generally people come up with pretty good stuff, resources to access. So there's lots of stuff out there. So you want to limit their access. Practically in the house, nobody should have a device or a phone or anything that's attached to the internet in their rooms privately. Just shouldn't happen. Shouldn't have that. I don't have that at my house. Nobody should have that. All the computers and phones and devices just right out there in the open. That's hard. It's really hard, especially if you have a teenager who likes to be on their phone. So build some boundaries, put some parameters. Don't just give everybody free willy-nilly to do whatever they want. So you want to make sure you have boundaries around access to the material. And have the conversation, and lots of conversations. You're not just done because you addressed it once. Come back to it. Come back to it. Okay. So ages, dealing with younger children, you want to be proactive. So my wife's a child development expert, and so this is where she would dude, you got to get this right. So age appropriately, you do have to begin to educate about sex. There's a great, this is where you can use resources and books and things. There's a good book out there, you can write this down, it's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's produced out in Utah. Super popular book, but I can't remember what age, the youngest age it goes to, but it's pretty young. It just begins to introduce kids to the issue of negative images and negative things around sex and sexuality. So, but you want to start the bigger, that's the bullet point underneath the bigger topic of sexuality. So you want to start age appropriately talking about sex. I was blown away. There's a baptismal guide that we have in the Adventist church, and it just blew me away that it actually deals with, there's a little section in there that deals with porn. I was like, whoa, where'd this come from? And so it actually helped me to start a conversation with my daughter when she was, I think she was 11 or something. So I was starting a conversation with her and continuing the conversation. So, you have to kind of know where that kid is if you're a parent and start to expose them to more and more information. And remember, that education, that information is powerful. So when they go to school and they hear some boy say penis or vagina, they're not like, oh, what's penis or vagina? Let me go look that up, because what are they going to get? All kinds of stuff, right? What's sex, Daddy? What's all this, teacher? Because they're gonna be exposed. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They're gonna be exposed to sex, and to some extent, we can expect them to be exposed to unhealthy and inappropriate sex. So yeah, be proactive, having the conversations, helping them to know about their bodies, also helping them to know and understand about unhealthy and inappropriate sex images and so forth like that. And there's tons of resources out there. You can start with good pictures, bad pictures. You can start with, nothing's coming to mind at the moment. I have a list of books on my website, bernieanderson.org. I think that's up there. Yeah, Bernie. You can go there and check that out too. But still, I'm not giving you a pass on this. It's on you. You are the primary discipler of your child. So you have to go out. Don't say, well, they didn't tell me about it and I didn't know. No, you better know. And if you don't know, you better figure it out. You better start asking questions. You better start searching the internet for some good stuff. And you got to become empowered around this thing too. But again, you hold the trump card. You are the parent. Now I have a 22-year-old, right? So I don't get to do as much parenting there, unless it's invited. But we still speak into it, right? We still speak into it. It's just the dynamic changes. Younger ones, you can be really intentional, focus them, inform them appropriately as you come along. Hope that helps. Anything else along those lines? Lots of resources. Just go looking. You'll find some gems.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Bernie. Appreciate it. Can we give him another round of applause? Thank you for taking the time. Thank you. So this has been a long Sabbath. It's been a good Sabbath, but we've started the conversation, and I can tell you for a fact that the pastoral staff is not interested in this being a flash in the pan. Okay? This is not a one and done type deal. We're starting the conversation, and we are going to continue the conversation and being intentional about providing families and men and women with the resources and the hope and the healing that they need. So this is not over. We're just started the conversation. Pastor Ewan, can you come up and close us with prayer and kind of give us any final comments you have as our chief and captain?
Jesus is the chief and captain. I'm under the shepherd together with you. Bernie, thank you much. I hope we'll have the chance to meet again. And for all of us, I just would like to conclude on this note. How many of you are familiar with Ellen White's book, Mind, Character, and Personality? If you have time this week, look up chapter 72 of volume 2. Chapter 72, I forgot the title. It was something about health, mind, thoughts, and something of the sort. But one of the ideas from this chapter is thoughts plus feelings equal character. What you allow to ruminate on, what you let in your mind, and you have full control over that. And particular feelings that you let simmer and stay in your heart, when they combine with thoughts, they form your character. And if you're battling any addiction, whatever that can be, the battle is inside, and it's in your mind. The battle is about who's going to have control over your thoughts and over your feelings. You combine these two, and day after day, you're forging character. If today is difficult to stay on track, but you do it nevertheless, tomorrow is going to be easier, because it's like a muscle. You're building it up, you're working it out, and it's going to be easier and easier to win the victory. So may God bless us all to forge this character, to watch our thoughts and what we let, because you don't need to go on the website to look at porn. You can do porn in your head. This is why Jesus says, whoever looks at a woman lustfully. Because he's asking us for something higher, to be guardians of our thoughts and our feelings. So may God bless us all, guys, and thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you so much for being here, and again, thank you, Bernie. So let's bow our heads. Actually, get up on your feet. You have been sitting for a while. It's going to be good. Heavenly Father, we listen today to the theory of victory over addictions, over lustful thoughts. And yet, now that we are exiting this place, we're going into the real mission field where we're going to test what we have learned here. And Lord, as you are sending these tests, you have promised you're not going to test us more than we can bear. Would you please be faithful to this promise? And if there is anyone here battling whatever addiction or issue he or she may be struggling with, grant victories, Lord. Help us to be faithful guardians of the most precious treasure you have given us, the grace that forms character within us and slowly chisels away the things that stay in the way of you seeing yourself reflected in us. Thank you, Father, for sending us Bernie, And please bless him, bless his family, bless his girls. And Lord, when the time comes for them, help them to find godly men. And Heavenly Father, bless us here as the leadership of this church. Bless Pastor Jeremy and Chappie, myself. Give us divine wisdom, Lord. How to be first a model of integrity to our congregation, and how to help our young and not that young men and women to follow you and to preserve this purity of character that will make us shine in this world and attract other people to you. In the name of your Son, we humbly ask. Amen.